Where you live, it's so much more than just a roof over your head, isn't it? It's really the foundation of your entire life. And for 11 million people renting here in the UK, that foundation is about to go through the biggest shakeup in a generation. We are talking about a massive overhaul of the private rental market. Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to dig into the problem the UK is facing with renting. Then we'll look at the new Bill of Rights being proposed. After that, we'll break down the biggest changes, explore all the hopes and fears around it, and finally, we'll talk about what this all means for the future. So let's start with the big question. Why is this happening right now? To really get why this new bill is so important, we first have to understand the sheer scale of the issues it's trying to solve. Now, we are not talking about a small niche issue here. This affects 4.6 million households. To put that in perspective, the private rental sector has literally doubled in size since the early 2000s. It's now the second largest way people are housed in the entire country. But here's the kicker. Behind that incredible growth, a staggering 21% of these rental homes are officially classified as non-decent. And what does non-decent even mean? Well, we're talking about almost a million homes with serious problems. Think damp, mold, or being dangerously cold. And this isn't just a housing problem. It's a public health crisis. The hazardous conditions in these homes cost the NHS an estimated £340 million every single year. That's a cost we all bear. Okay, so in response to these really deep-seated problems, the government has come forward with its answer, the Renters' Rights Bill. People are calling this the biggest shakeup of tenancy law in 30 years, and its main goal? To fix what the government itself describes as a fundamental power imbalance between landlords and their tenants. So don't think of this as just one little tweak. No, this is a whole package of reforms. It's all designed to rebalance those scales, to give tenants more security, make sure homes are up to scratch, and give people a real voice when things go wrong. Right, that all sounds pretty good in theory. But what will this legislation actually do? Let's dive in and break down the four most important changes. First up, we have to talk about something called a Section 21 notice, or a no-fault eviction. Right now, this gives a landlord the power to end a tenancy with just 2 months' notice, and they don't have to give any reason at all. And under the new bill, it's gone. Poof. Completely abolished. This is probably the single biggest change in the whole thing. The goal is to stop tenants from being afraid to complain about repairs or poor conditions because they fear they'll just get kicked out. Getting rid of no-fault evictions leads to another huge shift. The bill scraps fixed-term contracts, those 6 or 12-month agreements, and replaces them with a single system of rolling tenancies. Basically, your tenancy just keeps going month to month with no end date, which gives tenants a lot more flexibility to leave when they need to. And the reforms don't stop there. The bill also brings in new rules to limit rent hikes to just once a year. It creates a mandatory ombudsman to settle disputes so people don't have to go to court. There's a new public database of landlords for more transparency. And finally, it extends a WOBS law to private rentals, which forces landlords to fix serious hazards like damp and mold much faster. So, these changes are obviously massive. But what's going to happen when the rubber hits the road? This is where the debate gets really, really interesting. The government's own analysis presents this as a huge balancing act. On one side, the benefits for tenants are massive, but hard to put a price tag on. Things like better health and more stability. On the other side, landlords are facing new costs and a lot more admin for things like the new ombudsman and database. And this leads us to the number one fear that critics bring up. Are all these new rules and costs just going to drive smaller individual landlords to sell up and leave the market altogether? But there's a counter-argument to that fear. The government's own report points north to Scotland. They brought in really similar reforms back in 2017, and the data shows there was no mass exodus of landlords. In fact, the rental sector there actually kept on growing. And this is where it gets really complicated, because there are some tough unanswered questions. Like, if you ban rental bidding wars, do landlords just advertise a higher rent from the start? Will they just pass on all their new costs to tenants anyway? And could this whole thing actually push out small landlords in favor of huge corporate investors? These are the potential unintended consequences everyone is talking about. So, after weighing the problems, the sweeping solutions, and all the complicated debates, what's the big picture here? What's the endgame? When you boil it all down, this bill is a deliberate, conscious effort to reshape the entire rental market. It's about fundamentally rebalancing the relationship between landlords and the 11 million people who call a rented property their home. But ultimately, the success or failure of this whole thing will hinge on one central question. Can it actually strike the right balance? Can it protect tenants without accidentally shrinking the supply of rental homes and making things even more expensive? And that leaves us with the final, critical question. Is this a revolution that will create a fairer market for millions? Or could it be a trigger for even higher rents and fewer choices? That really is the multi-billion-pound question, and the answer will only become clear once these reforms become law.